Alright, what's going on, y'all? We're back once again, and of course we're gonna do a sports video. For once, it's actually not gonna be football heavy, but we are gonna start with a football topic. In fact, the news broke this morning. I'm gonna try to make sure I don't mess this up because I'm not used to pronouncing this specific name, but Azeez Al-Shaair, or Shawahir. I'm probably messing that up at least a couple times over, but either way, he's actually been handed a 3-game suspension after his hit against Trevor Lawrence in the game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, of course, Houston Texans linebacker. And it's just really, really wild because, you know, this sort of thing's going to generate an awful lot of conversation one way or another. I think that's just fair to say, especially when it comes to things like concussion protocol and so forth. But the biggest thing for me is actually something that Akbar Bijamila said, and speaking of names that I think I butchered, but Akbar talked about something significant in all of that, and what he said is that it's really unfair if you don't show the highlight of that play in anything other than real time, because it just doesn't tell the whole story. Because it was one of those situations where, you know, what are you supposed to do? You know, he was coming in, he did lead with the helmet, but of course he was actually looking to get the tackle on him, you know, and of course with the timing of Lawrence's slide, it just wound up being too late. You can't pull up, I mean, you can't pull back. Like, what are you supposed to do in that situation? And I think it's understandable. What's really interesting is that Isaiah Steinbach, also on Good Morning Football, mentioned, you know, that Al-Shaair is actually a repeat offender. He's actually had this sort of thing happen before. So maybe there's an aspect of this to where he's, you know, not emotionally intelligent enough to handle these things, and he needs some work with that. And that's probably true too, but I think the thing that we got to look at here is the bottom line is that this boils down to an awful lot of human element. And of course Trevor Lawrence did clarify that he was okay. I believe he posted on Twitter. But regardless, just given that this has been an issue for pretty much as long as football itself has been a thing, I'm just not sure that there are but so many things that could have been done better. It's just really, really difficult no matter how you slice it up. But through it all, I feel as if hopefully with this talented player as Al-Shaair seems to be, he's actually been significant in a part of what's been good for the defenses. He's actually a former Jaguar, if I recall correctly, and you know, you'd like to see this not be a thing so much, but we'll find out. I mean, it's real interesting because you look at the NBA and Draymond Green, you know, it's just, what do you do about these sort of things? It's really, really tricky. But we're going to go ahead and move along, and we're actually going to talk about the NBA, specifically Jimmy Butler, where, of course, he was injured in last night's NBA Cup game against the Boston Celtics. I really am wanting to bring up Jimmy just for the fact that I feel like it's probably time for him and the Miami Heat to finally part ways. I don't know necessarily how and when that's going to wind up happening, much less who the other side of that trade is going to wind up being. But it's just not working out. I'm not really sure what it is with Heat culture as we know it or anything like that, but you know, they did a lot. They put things together around Jimmy Butler, but was it ever really necessarily enough? I mean, they got to the NBA Finals a couple of years ago against the Denver Nuggets, where they were outmatched specifically in terms of size, and I'm not sure what the Heat have actually done to address that as much. I'm just of the mindset that on the right team now, he's definitely going to be a factor for a contender still. Probably going to be one of the best two players, if not maybe still the best player on that team as well, even at age 35, 36, wherever he is now. But it just seems as though it's just, this has got to be coming to an end at some point. And I feel like Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra, and the brain trust with the Miami Heat are aware of this. And one way or another, I feel as if this is something that could happen sooner or later, certainly by the trade deadline, where hopefully they're able to get the value that they're looking for Jimmy Butler. But yeah, you hate to see these things linger on the way that they have, and that's literally all this is doing now, is lingering. I mean, 2 trips to the NBA Finals that were unsuccessful, and again, what did they do to put anything else around him to actually get better? You know, it's just unfortunate to see, but yeah, I think it's time for both sides to move on from one another. And with that, we're going to move on to the NBA Cup, which we're going to have a couple of good games tonight. As I recall, it's going to be Milwaukee and Boston, and I believe Golden State and Denver, if I recall correctly. That's going to be airing tonight on NBA on TNT, and of course, this has actually been a really, really fun thing that they've done for the league. I do want to mention that I will talk also about the changes that they're making to the All-Star game, which I gotta imagine aren't really welcome changes, but it's just really, really difficult to understand. But I want to talk about the Cup specifically because it's actually added a different element to the game, especially when you look at the courts themselves. You know, they've got a different design than your typical NBA floor, and it's themed specifically for the NBA Cup itself. I enjoyed it a lot last year. It's been more enjoyable. I like the structure that they put around it, having it on Tuesdays and Fridays, and of course, we're getting to the finale of that, I believe, tomorrow, and I guess it'll be concluding this week. I'm not exactly sure on the details of that, but for me, it's been a very, very welcome change, unlike, again, the aforementioned changes to the All-Star game, which we'll talk about another time. But, you know, it's definitely something fun. There's actually incentive in that, and I guess that's why I want to reference those changes to said All-Star game. Like, I'm just wondering what all the incentive has been for the All-Star game in recent years, because there's always talk about, you know, how the likes of Jordan, Magic, Bird, Dr. J, Kareem, Wilt, you know, and even Barkley, Malone, and even in the later years with Garnett, Iverson, Kobe, and so forth, like, a lot of that was different when they were in the game, and I just find it strange that, you know, they're not actually following suit with this and actually coming through with, I don't know, some sort of method of incentive for the players, because the product hasn't been as good being the All-Star game over the last few years. But I don't know, it's just really, really tricky. We'll see if they get that figured out. It's really, really weird, but again, we'll talk about that another time. Nonetheless, y'all know what it is. Let me know what y'all think. Like, share, subscribe down below, and of course, this has been your time with A&J, and I thank you for spending it with me.